shows up, and that's just me. I mean, they're a great tool to monitor what's going on. You get some tremendous pictures, and it's amazing what is actually out in the woods that you don't know about until you hang a trail camera. But at the present time, I don't even got one. I messed around and gotten a tight for some money and ended up selling my trail cameras. I had a few, but anyway, he showed up and did his grunt, snort, wheezing, and stalking around, looking and everything like that. And then he attacked this magnolia tree. Now I'm talking about, he may have been 2.5, and but there's no way he was a day older than that, and that's giving him everything he had. It was a 1.5 year old deer, and there's bark went to flying and everything, because I looked at him through the scope. He wasn't 40 yards, and I watched him for a long time and everything, and there's bark flying, and he just really was aggravated at that tree. And like I said, he came to the horns to begin with. And I remember thinking up there, as many articles as I had written, and as much I had done in the whitetail woods, if I had walked up there and saw that sign, I would have sworn that it was like a 20-inch, 140-inch deer that rubbed that tree. Don't work that way. Sorry, it don't work that way. So back to early season bow hunting. Try to key on areas that's got any kind of rubs, because they may be made by a couple of little smaller bucks, and they'll have this one bruiser that's traveling with him, you know, or with them. And so the rubs around dropping acorn trees is a really, really deadly combination. And when you hang your tree stands, of course, you know, try to figure out what your prevailing wind is, what wind is best to hunt that stand on. We used to keep a big board up in the hunting cabin that we had, and we'd put an index card up for every stand that we hung, because I'm telling you, once you get to hanging so many different stands, it gets really, really hard to remember where you put them all and everything like that. Now, I ain't never really had that problem, because I'm not a big believer in GPS and all that kind of stuff. Every time I pull a GPS out of my pocket, it won't lock up, or it got turned on by accident or anything. The only GPS that I have sense enough to operate is called a Garmin Backtracker, and that is the bomb diggity when it comes to GPS for me. But that's the only one I know how to run. But I try to keep an overall knowledge of the tract of ground in my mind all the time. And if I can ever look at a map, that's the first thing I'm going to do, is find me a map. And if I can look at a map and figure out how it all lays in there, then I got a pretty good idea of what wind direction that I need to hunt a particular stand on, based upon the fact that I know which way is north, which way is south, and which way is east, and which way is west. And just in my mind. Now, I'll take a compass and pull it out down there at the stand sometimes and see what kind of wind that I draw. But I'm just going to go on and tell you about the southeast. A lot of people ain't never experienced this before in their life. Of course, it happens in Illinois, it happens in Wisconsin, it happens everywhere. Basically, what you're hoping to do is survive the the deer that do start blowing or smelling you and stuff like that. But I can tell quite a few stories about deer just raising cane, snorting and carrying on, and some of them would be smelling me and have a buck show up anyway. And I've seen deer they snorting and snorting and snorting and carrying on, and me up there doing as one of the kid men on the old Primo series. I think they got something out called small town hunting now, but anyway, I'd turn into red wasp mode. I'd be like, we're not gonna kill no deer there. There's no way we're gonna kill no deer here this evening. 'Cause, I got a camera guy in most cases now, not anymore, but used to. Everything I did, with the camera guy, and there's been several different ones, but you know I carry on a lot of conversation when I'm up in the stand. If I want to go hunting by myself, I go hunting by myself. If I'm gonna go with a camera and there's somebody up there to talk to, I'm gonna talk to them. I'm gonna whisper to them. But there was these deer, and they were blowing and blowing and blowing and blowing and blowing and carrying on and this and that and the other, and I was like, what? And I did notice that it was moving. Like it started out pretty far distance away, and then it got a little closer and a little closer and a little closer. And the deer were blowing at a bobcat. One of them triggered a chain reaction, and they all just jumped on the bandwagon. And I was sitting up there when the bobcat showed up, and all. And I reckon the closest one that blew to me was probably about 100 yards. And there shortly thereafter, here come this bobcat, just kind of chilling, going about his daily business. As a matter of fact, that was in that same little hole of water oak. But back to this whole original, before I got sidetracked so hard. Well, I got to tell one more story. This beat all that I ever seen. One of the biggest deer I ever killed with my bow for a long time. I was sitting on the corner of the property, and it was all planted pine trees, but right there at that corner there was a little branch that came down through there, a little creek, and it went across the fire lane. It was that kind of branch. In other words, like when they plowed the fire lane, of course it being paper company land, they probably was plowing it with a bulldozer or pulling the harrow with a bulldozer. But anyway, when they plowed the fire lane, they could just plow right through it. That's how much water was coming down. It wasn't much water at all, but it did count as a SMZ, and that was before they started cheating on SMZs. And for those of y'all who don't know what a SMZ is, it's a stream side management zone, and it basically says that land can't be logged up to a certain point, to a creek or anything, to water. It leaves a buffer to keep erosion and stuff out. And I was sitting about 100 yards off the fence line, but it made a hard corner right there. It was a property line corner, so it was going, let's say it was going north, and then all of a sudden it turned straight to the east, that hard a corner. And I was sitting back on the north side, but where I was sitting I could see up the east side, and so I was sitting there and I had carried a climber in there, and I couldn't get but about 8-10 foot off the ground. I tried to climb one tree, that didn't work out. Of course, I'm upset. It's a place I had never been before. So then I got over there and I got on another tree, and I got up there, but that was just all I had. I mean, there just wasn't nothing there to climb. As a matter of fact, I thought about building me a ground blind, but that's a recipe for disaster unless you're going to shoot the first doe that comes along. But I climbed up as far as I could go, and I couldn't have been at the very, very most. I was 12 foot off the ground, the base of the bottom stand, which by the time I stand up, puts me about 16 feet to the level of my bow where you'd be drawing and all. And so I figured I was going to have to be, as Preston Gothard would say, I was going to have to be real good this evening. So I was sitting up there, and here come this doe down through there, and she came. I think she had a young'un with her, and there was white oaks that were dropping. There was several white oak trees dropping down through that ditch, a few up behind me, and then some right down there where the ditch intersected the fire lane. There was a whole cluster of them right in there, but there was no place you could climb down there. And I just kind of backed on up the hill a little bit and hoped for the best. So I was sitting there, and the doe showed up with the yearling, and they fooled around. I thought about shooting the doe, but really, in all truthfulness, I didn't want to blow up the area. And the second thing is I didn't want to have to trailer up and fool with all that busy that evening. So I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, down the east side of the fire lane, a bunch of deer got to blowing down there. And I knew they weren't blowing me. The wind was in my face. And so I knew they couldn't smell me, and I was like, what in the world? And so they were having a commotion down there. Now, it took a lot to get in this place. It was kind of a swamp place, and you had to ride like one four-wheeler, and then we had to leave a four-wheeler on the other side, because when it rained you couldn't get across to it, but we could cross on a cable bridge, and then you had to walk. I mean, it took a lot to get in there, which is probably another reason why I didn't show much interest in shooting a doe. And so after they blew down in there for a little while, it kind of chilled out and everything calmed down. And then here come a doe out from down there, and she started feeding on the white oaks, down there in front of me. And so I stood up and kind of just leaned back against a tree, and I don't know if I had a bow hook, or I may have just held the bow. Probably just held the bow on this particular stand. But anyway, I was standing up there and all that kind of stuff, and all of a sudden, when I bent over, I could look up the fire lane. I could look up the east fire lane. So I looked up through there, and there was some yearlings, and they were playing, or what I thought that's what they were doing. But it was a bunch of them. It was like 4 or 5 yearlings. Where all them yearlings come from, I don't know. Of course, 2 of them may have belonged to the doe that was in front of me, but I don't know where the rest of them come from. And so I bent over, and all of a sudden, and I should have known immediately, but I didn't even think about it. All I see was a deer walking, and those yearlings was butting around with him and playing with him and all. And I said, well, that's a big doe coming right there. But I should have known when I bent over and looked up through there, I should have known from the width of his chest. His chest was huge. I can remember that, and I can remember distinctly seeing right between his front shoulders how wide he was. And I didn't even think nothing about it other than there's a doe. And so I leaned back. I wasn't too worrying about nothing too much, and that deer stopped and fooled around, and those yearlings just kept butting into him. I could see the yearlings pretty good, but I couldn't see the other deer. I could just see their 4 feet, you know, and